This video is supported by Skillshare. Hey, Marcus Housewithy here. As your single-stop shop for space news supplements, I'm super stoked today's episode is brought to you by the letter S. With a sophisticated Starship stacking, Starlink setting sail, SOFIA surprisingly snuffed, Starliner securely situated, and SpinLaunch starting up, I'm seriously set to satisfy your insatiable space-skewed senses.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Sliding into SpaceX's Starbase journey since last Saturday's updates. Right, you have got to knock that off. Yeah, fair point. After Booster 7 made the way back to the launch site and was placed into the launch mount, it has since undergone cryogenic proof tests after a few weeks of having major repairs to its damaged methane downcomer. On Monday morning at 9 AM, the entire pad needed to be cleared within 30 minutes and all non-essential personnel vacated the site. It wasn't until 3 PM that the pad was finally cleared though, and just an hour later, the liquid nitrogen load had begun, with the oxygen tank beginning to frost over. By 6 PM, both tanks were fully iced up, which was a great sign that the tests had proceeded well. Soon after, the vehicle detanked and the road was reopened. That wasn't the end of the action for the booster though. On Wednesday, the launch pad was cleared again, and Booster 7 completed a second full cryogenic test for the week, which seemed to go very successful again. So yes, there is no official word on how this test went, but we don't see any signs to suggest that anything bad happened. So we hope that this means that the repairs and the replacements made to the damaged downcomer have held up well. What is still unknown at the moment is if they will use Booster 7 here just for ground testing or if they will indeed intend to launch it. What is known, however, is this exciting news. The structure that allows for engines to be installed on the booster while it is on the orbital launch mount was moved nearby. So yes, it seems very likely that there will at least be a few Raptor 2s installed. After that, who knows? We could even expect to see a static fire in the near future if everything goes to plan. The last time when this platform here was used was way back in September of last year, where a Raptor was test fitted onto Booster 4. And yes, this is what the Raptor maintenance platform looks like in action. On Thursday, the LR11000 crane was hooked back up to Booster 7, and it was then removed from the orbital launch mount and placed onto the transport stand early on Friday morning. Over at the production facility, Ship 24's tank section was moved into the high bay last weekend for final stacking with the nose cone section. That tank section was lifted up and onto the turntable, and soon after the nose cone was hooked up and lifted up onto that tank section. The two sections soon began to rotate, indicating that the robot was being used to weld them together. By Tuesday evening, Ship 24 had been removed from the turntable in the high bay, fully attached. So yes, there we have Ship 24 now completely stacked in the high bay, and it is only now awaiting the aft flap installation before the main body of the vehicle is completed. Now this is the ship that is sporting that Pez dispenser payload door that we believe will shoot out several Starlink version 2 satellites, or it is at least a prototype of such a payload deployment mechanism. Bloomberg reported last week that Gwen Shotwell, SpaceX's chief operating officer and president, is expecting to see Starship launch out of Texas by this summer, which for those of us in the southern hemisphere is our winter, so just over the next few months. At this point in time, as far as we know, Ship 24 is the vehicle planned to conduct the first orbital launch at Starbase. This is obviously pending the final assessment from the FAA, which does seem to be on track for the end of May. Also, at the production site in the nose cone tent, Ship 25's possible nose cone is now sporting a full set of heat shield tile attachment pins. On Monday, two self-propelled modular transporters, or SPMTs, were preparing the old Starship 16 that has been living in the rocket garden here all this time. It also had lifting points added onto the nose cone as well. Now, preparing for what, you may ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. On Tuesday morning, it was on the move, being rolled out of the rocket garden onto Highway 4 and into the brand new wide bay. This is the first vehicle to take residence inside, and it was hooked up for lifting. And this also made it the first heavy lifting test vehicle for the new wide bay's bridge crane. So yes, it is great to see the old Starship 16 being used to test some of these processes. Since then, the nose cone of the ship has actually been separated from the rest of the vehicle. I'm unsure at this point if we're seeing the start of the scrapping process or if SpaceX are actually doing some modifications to support some further tests with it. Now, on Wednesday morning, just before Booster 7's second cryo test, Ship 20 began rolling along Highway 4 at around 10 in the morning. Where was it off to? Yep, you guessed it, back to the production site it rolled after spending around 9 months at the launch site. An hour and a half after leaving, it turned into the rocket garden to take the spot previously occupied by Starship 16. Now, there's a very good reason, I think, why we've seen SpaceX holding on to these old vehicles all this time. Think of the many process tests that will need to be done at the Cape as they are preparing to get the site ready for flight. I still suspect the first vehicles to fly at the Cape will likely be constructed in Boca Chica rather than the Cape facility itself. It is going to take a long time for all of those construction facilities to be built out. It seems plausible to me that proven boosters and Starships may need to make the long trip from Boca Chica over to Florida. Of course, we've never seen SpaceX transport these Starship vehicles any other way than vertically. This certainly can't remain the case though. It doesn't matter if they are needed for orbital ocean platforms or in Florida itself. SpaceX will certainly need to lay them down and ship them off with a vehicle similar to NASA's Pegasus barge used for the Space Launch System. Remember, Starship is 9 meters wide and rockets of this diameter are just too impractical to transport on most roads like they do with Falcon 9. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me at all if SpaceX choose to use one of the Rocket Garden articles such as the booster here for a test trip. Think of all those currently untested procedures that SpaceX needs to nail down before they would be willing to risk moving a fully flight-ready vehicle in such a manner. Sometimes the processes and procedures required for its handling and the potential risks involved is equally as important as the engineering of the technology that goes into them. Now, speaking of Starbase 2 at Florida, major work continues on the build of the production and launch facilities. Foundations continue to be laid at the Roberts Road facility for ship and booster production. This here is where a possible future high bay will be, which has already had much of the foundation work done. Furthermore, the concrete footings are clearly visible for the Star Factory, which we think will be a very similar design and build process as the new building going up in Texas. And then nearby, we can see that nearly 5 tower sections have been completed there as well. At Launchpad 39A, the Starship launch facilities continue to grow, with the tower base getting wider and the orbital launch mount base growing taller. Great shots of the entire facility from orbit here as shared by Harry Stranger. Now, interestingly, over at the McGregor Raptor testing facility, it seems here that a Raptor 2 engine has had a rapid unscheduled disassembly at the test site during the week. Now, it's unknown if SpaceX may have been just pushing it to its limits or something like that perhaps, but all the same, that is indeed a very strange sight to see. Now, a quick shout out as well for the brilliant artists out there working on a new SpaceX board game. You might remember us all talking about the first game, Starship Shuffle, which was a lot of fun as well. A new board game is underway now called Stage Zero, which I'm looking forward to seeing when it's all finished. This one is all about constructing Mechazilla, delivering Raptors to the launch site and all that great stuff. Tony Bella, who makes these amazing infographics, is providing production artwork as well, I believe. Eric X helping out as well. That is pretty cool, and you can check out a lot more in the detail from the link in the description if you are interested in following the progress on that. Thanks for following and helping all those wonderful artists out there, and also thanks a lot to you for all the comments on the water deluge system in last Saturday's video. Awesome of you all there engaging, liking and subscribing to what I do here. We have so much to cover each week, and this week is absolutely no different, with SpaceX smashing out the frequency of these Starlink launches so far in 2022 as Shell 4 of the network continues to grow. The launch was great as always, but the updates on the surface itself are even more interesting. First, the launch though. Lifting off from Vandenberg Space Force Base on the west coast, the flight-proven booster powered its way into orbit, with this being its 5th launch and landing. The fairing jettison there soon exposed the 53 Starlink satellites to the vacuum of space. The booster headed on back to the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, some 640 kilometers downrange. Sadly, we didn't get to see live coverage of the landing or the satellite deployment. However, the feed did cut back to the aftermath of a successful landing. So we have all heard of the benefits of the Starlink broadband service, especially for remote areas. More recently, there has been a focus on Ukraine and how Starlink has assisted there for essential services. I'll jump into that in just a moment, but first, a big thank you to Skillshare today for supporting this video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and even just get lost in creativity. You can find almost any creative subject that you're interested in right here. Before you know it, there you will be doing work with new tools that you didn't even know that you were missing. Now, you can see little credits pop up here on the screen like this all the time here, right? Perhaps even automatic conversions like this one right here. Now, there is a cool little trick that I use to rapidly place these, and you can learn how to do it too. In this course, Jake Bartlett teaches you how to start making your very own motion graphic templates. These templates are used in After Effects and are then usable and even customizable in Premiere Pro, which is also what we use in the bulk of our video work here. He walks you through how to use the Essential Graphics panel in After Effects in order to build out and customize controls for your design. And there is loads of other courses by Jake as well, such as Animating with Ease. That's another fun one. Skillshare is organized specifically for learning with no ads interrupting you, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can keep exploring and expanding your creativity. If you'd like to give it a try, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description or use my code on screen will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so that you can start exploring your creativity today. So yes, a recent tweet from the Ukraine Vice Prime Minister stated here that there are now approximately 150,000 daily users of the Starlink service since it was activated at the end of February. The gateway in neighbouring Poland keeps communications going, as well as allowing modifications to the software itself, updates such as being able to reduce power consumption and run Starlink from a vehicle cigarette lighter alone, meaning users are less reliant on generators. On a more global scale, portability has also been recently announced. This means that users have now got an option to pay an extra amount each month that will also allow them to temporarily move to other locations within the same serviced area, but with less reliability than a fixed service user. So yes, all exciting updates, and while the service delivery continues to evolve here, the launches keep on marching on, with SpaceX expected to launch yet another batch of satellites very soon after this video goes live. Boeing's Starliner capsule is finally back in the news for all the right reasons, with everything looking good for this coming week's second uncrewed orbital flight test. On May the 4th, Starliner was moved to United Launch Alliance's vehicle processing facility at Slick 40, much to the delight of all of the staff involved. Hoisted atop an Atlas V rocket, Starliner is now looking set to make its much anticipated journey to the International Space Station, carrying around 225 kilograms of cargo. With its first orbital flight test, one plagued by software and hardware issues in its mission at the end of 2019, this mission certainly feels like it has been a long time coming. I've got my fingers crossed here that everything is going to go 100% to plan this time around, and if so, Starliner will remain docked for several days, with its performance being monitored the entire journey. Starliner's mission this time though has got so much more riding on it than the cargo that it will carry to and from the station. If this mission does not go well, you can only imagine the impact that it would make on the production of further vehicles. I think it's fair to say that December 2019 was not the way that Boeing wanted to introduce Starliner to the world, and we'll be looking to see if any of the previous issues appear again. So why has it been this length of time until this next mission? Well, what followed Orbital Flight Test 1 was 18 months of intensive work with NASA to review and correct software issues. This even included one identified that could have seen the spacecraft's service module collide with the crew module just after separation before re-entry. As an astronaut on board, I can tell you with a reasonable amount of certainty that this is an experience that will add just a little stress to your day. Fast forward to August 2021, and it seemed that Orbital Flight Test 2, the same mission that we are now awaiting, was set to go. Just hours though from liftoff, stuck valves in the spacecraft's propulsion system on the service module caused a launch scrub that turned into another major delay. In fact, investigations later found 13 valves had stuck closed due to corrosion from nitrogen tetroxide mixing with moisture. This issue was not seen in Orbital Flight Test 1 or other previous testings, which was curious in itself. Where the valves in question are still the same design, new processes have been implemented, such as dry purging the valves with nitrogen gas to eliminate any moisture beforehand. The nitrogen tetroxide is now going to be loaded later in the processing phase, as well as having regular activation of the valves to verify that they can move. So yes, here we are just days away from a potential launch, and I certainly hope all goes well. The politics aside, while the extensive delays have been disappointing for sure, much has been learned since 2019. Ultimately, this can only be a good thing as Boeing and NASA move closer now to an actual crewed mission. Should everything go well with Orbital Flight Test 2, Mark Nappy, the Vice President and the Program Manager of Starliner at Boeing, has speculated that a crewed flight could take place before the end of this year. So the stage is now set. Now, it has been a little while since I talked about SpinLaunch. Just recently, they've been in the news yet again after presenting this footage of their flight test number 8, where the engineering team have now added in the very first camera to the payload being hurled out of their innovative suborbital accelerator. The accelerator itself here is essentially a massive vacuum chamber, and they are using a spinning arm to accelerate a projectile, which in the future will be a much more complex rocket, and then fling it into the sky, all in order to lower the cost of launch. Take a look at this onboard footage. This payload here is a little larger than it currently appears at 3 meters, and it is being launched into the atmosphere at over 1600 kilometers per hour. Just being able to see some more of these visuals here is certainly nice for publicity. It's important to recognize, of course, that this is just a stepping stone to their much grander plan of launching much larger masses to orbit, also providing customers with low-cost, sustainable access to space. Well, that is the sales pitch at least. They plan to be capable of delivering up to 200 kilograms into low Earth orbit for the low price of $500,000. Those vehicles are going to be launched much quicker too, at around 8,000 kilometers per hour. But this, of course, all assumes that the rocket and the payload, which also contains all of this propellant and hardware, can handle the insane G-forces, some estimating up to 10,000 Gs. Now, this is obviously only for robust payloads. Having any human on board would quickly turn them into a smooth paste. You can see here that there will be a rocket inside a very strong heat-shielded casing, which is jettisoned kind of like a fairing would be. You would hope as well that there is some plan to recover and reuse these, as I imagine they would be very solid, containing a great deal of mass. In this case, mass is actually a good thing. It can punch through the atmosphere much better than a light vehicle can, and only the contents inside need to be lightweight. Now, I've always been just a little skeptical about this device, I must admit, but it has been getting a great deal of attention. NASA has even signed up a Space Act agreement to test this bizarre electrically driven whirl and hurl technology, a mission that will hopefully occur in a test flight later this year. I don't know though, the type of payload that you could really launch on this would be quite restrictive. To be honest, such a system makes much more sense to me on the moon. Imagine instead being able to hurl raw materials and propellant directly into a lunar orbit to be then picked up and shuttled to a space station. After all, these speeds that they are aiming at here on Earth is actually quite a bit higher than what is even necessary to get something into a lunar orbit. That's where I see a big benefit in this kind of thing. What do you think? Is this just kind of nuts, or do you think an orbital flight is possible using such technology? Now, you may have previously seen footage of SOFIA, or the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, which is the largest airborne observatory ever made. Well, sadly, it is now shutting down after over 8 years of operation. SOFIA was a joint project of NASA and the German space agency DLR. It's essentially a modified Boeing 747 SP, which has this monstrous door that can be opened in the rear of it in flight. What is within this area, though, is really quite astounding to me. It always has been. This is a telescope designed to make infrared observations while cruising along at an altitude of about 12 kilometers. See, usually the water vapor in our atmosphere blocks infrared rays from reaching the surface, so ground telescopes become fairly useless for observing that part of the spectrum. But SOFIA's ability to fly at this altitude above most of the water vapor and then make observations has really been tremendous. SOFIA has helped to study the lives of stars, galaxies, planets, comets, and asteroids. In 2019, SOFIA even helped to discover the first molecule formed in the universe almost 14 billion years ago, a molecule formed from hydrogen and helium called helium hydride. This is believed to have formed just 100,000 years after the Big Bang. Not only that, SOFIA has also helped discover water on the sunlit surface of the moon. Previous space missions had of course made observations suggesting the presence of water inside the moon's dark craters. SOFIA instead discovered that water may not be limited to just cold and shadowed places, but is instead distributed across the entire lunar surface as well, just in small amounts. So with all these great discoveries just over that 8-year period, why has NASA and DLR decided to shut it down? Well, it all comes down to SOFIA's high operating costs. NASA has spent almost $85 million a year on SOFIA, which is a greater sum than any operating astrophysics mission other than, of course, the major space telescopes. And this funding is starting now to eat into the limited NASA astrophysics budget and is said to be displacing other potentially more beneficial projects. At this point in time, it seems that SOFIA will end operations at the end of September. It's sad to see such an awesome project come to an end, but if NASA and DLR don't believe the cost is worth the result, then I guess it makes sense. I'm sure going to miss seeing scenes like these though. So that about does it for the week. I'll be back again next Saturday as always. You make this channel what it is. You, the community, and everybody that is thrilled by all things rockets. And hey, if you need some new gear to wear, well, you've always got this merch that you can pick up. A huge thank you to all these amazing patrons and YouTube members here scrolling by. Just check out all of you there. I'm so honoured that you love what I do so much to throw a few dollars at us each month. You have got no idea how much that helps the team and I out. If you would also like to support and to get some ad-free video releases before anyone else, the links to support there are in the description. Surprisingly snuffed, Starliner securely stitched and SpinLaunch sharing Starlink setting snail. Surprisingly stuffed, Starliner securely I am seriously set to satisfy your insatiable